Point of View is sponsored by First National Bank. First National Bank. How can we help you?
Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on The Point of View, we usually bring guests and interview them on important topics. On other occasions, we delve into important national conversations and express an opinion on them. It's a show that's brought to you by First National Bank. How can we help you? We have a special editorial for you tonight. It's highlights of a very important speech delivered by Sir Sam Jonah, some reactions that have emerged from the speech, and what we think about the importance of that speech. We'll tell you more when we come back. Stay with us.
It's a good day to meet every challenge. It's a good day to want more out of life. It's a good day to wish for it, work for it, go get it. Familiar taste, a delicious indulgent with a flavor you just can't hide. Refreshing energy, gives so much for so little. For a strong performance, you've come to the right place. Good Day Energy Drink. Why wait a minute to enjoy a good day when every second counts? Good Day Energy Drink keeps you going.
Excessive drinking can be detrimental to your health. Not recommended for persons under 18 years, lactating mothers, pregnant women, and people sensitive to caffeine. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the FDA.
It is another beautiful day in the lovely city of Accra. And just as expected, everyone is up to something. Busy day as usual.
Papa, so Kuma has also left us.
Oh, others are getting ready for school.
Guys, we are late. Hurry up. We're coming.
And in the busy streets of Accra, the mates are calling out to passengers. Whatever you have planned for today, don't leave home without your nose mask. Wearing a mask at all times will protect you from the coronavirus. And even after vaccination, continue to wear a mask and follow all existing protocols. Ghana needs you. Let's do the right thing. Wear your mask.
This message is brought to you by the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Information, the Ghana Health Service, and our donor partners.
Welcome back to The Point of View. And of course, tonight we're discussing a big conversation, a big speech. So Sir Sam Jonah, who is the former CEO of Ashanti Goldfields, Anglo Gold Ashanti, and who is now chairman of many things, gave a very important speech at the Accra East Rotary Club. And it was titled, Down the Up Escalator, his reflections as a senior citizen. And it's generated a lot of interest. So what I'm doing tonight is I'm going to do 5 things. I'm going to tell you why I want us to review and understand what's happening with this speech and why it's important. Then I'll tell you a bit about who Sir Sam Jonah is, because I noticed a lot of different people have been commenting on the speech. It's really rife on social media. So who is Sam Jonah and why is what he says important, right? Then we'll talk about what he actually said, because I noticed that a lot of people have just seen highlights of the speech. So I'm going to not just play the full speech, but I'm going to break it down for you to understand exactly what he says. Then I'm going to bring you some reactions to what he said. Now, we've been privileged here to speak to former President J. Kufuor on a wide variety of issues. That interview will air on Wednesday. And we took the liberty to ask him a couple of questions about what Sir Sam Jonah has said this past week. So we will tell you what President Kufuor has said about this. Then we'll tell you what we think and with how we think the speech should be processed. So those are the 5 things. So why is this such a big topic? Who is Sir Sam Jonah? What has he actually said? What have been some reactions to what he said and what we think? Now, let me take it to social media, because of all the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, the demographic for Twitter is much younger. Some people feel that demographic is also pretty enlightened. So some Jonah was trending over the weekend, all the way through this morning. I'm going to show you some of the key comments that have come in about what he said on social media. So, for example, somebody called Telefitchly tweets and says, everything Sam Jonah said is the truth. Okay, then somebody called Evans Gato says Sam Jonah has emphatically pointed out the core of our problems as a country without equivocation. Actions and inactions have consequences. We need a cataclysmic shift in the type of leadership and governance we have, our mindset and attitude. I'll be showing you more as we go along. Somebody called Ediquino, MBE, also tweets and says Sam Jonah's speech was both riveting, refreshing, yet depressing. His analysis exposes the general malaise of our country: corruption, mismanagement, lawlessness, and indiscipline. What about nepotism, tribalism, and cronyism? We should practice meritocracy. And this person sends this speech to the City Breakfast Show in the morning. So he uses the hashtag CityCBS. More comments on Sam Jonah still on this morning, because we discussed a bit of this on radio. Somebody called Luna says Sam Jonah's church is the one I would go to. It's the truth. Hashtag CityCBS. Then there are some reactions from different political actors. Some say his comments about Ghana's state of debt was not true. Some have posted pictures of Johannesburg and Obuasi and say that's his legacy, which are all very interesting reactions. There have also been snippets of what he said circulating on social media. I will show you some as the program proceeds. So for young people to be commenting on something somebody like Sam Jonah, who by the way is 71 years old, says, and to be commenting on such a seminal speech on national issues is important. It's refreshing that they are not discussing just other issues which people consider more trivial. So that's why we thought we should bring an editorial or send Sam Jonah today. And if you feel like commenting on it, please send us your comments on the WhatsApp number on the screen. We want to hear from you. What do you make of Sam Jonah's speech? Now, if you don't know who he is, I'm going to tell you who Sam Jonah is, because I think it's also important to know who he is. Okay, so yes, it's trending. Yes, it's big. He's one of the key people, but who is he? And what is his background? So there are a couple of things you need to know about Sam Jonah. Of course, he's Ghanaian. Born in 1979, November. So that makes him 71 years old. He's a businessman. He's a statesman, I think. He's graduated from being a businessman to a statesman. I'll tell you which kind of company I place him in terms of hierarchy in Ghana. But a few things about him. So by age 22, he started working for a company called Lonro in the UK. But his father, very interesting, says Jonah's father was a construction worker. And by age 22, he started working for a British company called Lonro in 1971. Now, Lonro is interesting because Lonro, in 1968, bought shares and took over Ashanti for some £3 million. Okay, that was in 1968, many years ago. At the time, Jonah was 19. He wasn't even working there. So he started as an intern. And he was noticed by the MD of Lonro, who saw him as promising. So Sam Jonah was actually sent to a mining school in Cornwall in the UK in his early 20s to understand more the nuances of mining. And from that age, from all his late 20s into his 30s, he was working in all aspects of the Ashanti operation. In fact, he worked in the mine. So he didn't just join as a chief executive. He actually mined in underground. So he was born in Obuasi, joined as a 20-something-year-old, was trained in Cornwall. The school is called Combon School of Mines. And then by age 30, was brought back to Ashanti at age 30. In 6 years, he had become the MD of the company. And by 1980, which is 1986-ish, and for many years, he was the first and only black man running a mining company. So he's respected in the mining world. Only black man running. Although most mines in Africa are owned by Africans, not many black people run not even Africans, black people ran a mining enterprise. And to run Ashanti at 36 was big. The other big thing is that by 2003, he had grown Ashanti multiple times over. I mean, the ounces of gold they were producing, doubled many times. So by the year 2000, 2001, 2002, Ashanti was considered one of the best performing mines. Of course, it became subject of a big takeover battle between British and gold. And this was around the year 2003. Very controversial indeed. Eventually, it was taking over. Ashanti was, if you like, merged with Anglo for over $1 billion. Huge story at the time. Of course, it had issues. So I remember in the late 90s, Ashanti went into some derivatives, and it didn't really go well. Former President Ronnie wasn't very happy with him. So he's had a lot of criticisms. And his journey, in fact, there's a nice book written about him. I'll show you the book shortly. The book was written a few years ago. I just wanted to show you the cover of the book on the screen. And that book is titled Sam Jonah and the Remaking of Ashanti. And it was written by A.A. Taylor. And let me just read the blurb so you get a sense of who he is. It says, Sam Jonah and the Remaking of Ashanti recounts the inspirational life of one of Africa's most prominent black businessmen. And there you have his picture on the cover. Yeah, so Sam Jonah is really respected. And if you read some of the write-ups about him, for example, if you read The Guardian 2003, August. So 2003, there was a huge division in Ghana between the pro-Rand Gold and pro-Anglo Gold people. And I remember journalists like Egbert Faber, Gabiotre Dakun were coming on radio and discussing the merits and demerits of each. Now, The Guardian wrote a very interesting article in 2002. Just read the first few paragraphs for you. It says, Sam Jonah, man with a Midas touch. And it says, Sam Jonah heads one of the biggest gold mining groups in the world, but wants to still get bigger. Let me just read a few paragraphs of this story. It says, Sam Jonah is the staff of African legend. 20 years ago, he became the first Ghanaian managing director of Ashanti Goldfields. Today, after building the company into one of the world's biggest gold mining groups, he is the architect of a $1 billion merger with rival Anglo Gold of South Africa. And perhaps surprising in an industry that employs tens of thousands of African miners, Jonah is still the only black boss of a gold mining company. This is 2003, almost 20 years ago. Then he talks about some of the stuff he did, how he grew the company, and what it would mean for Ghana and all of this. So he's a key figure in Ghana's business history, and also, if you like, our political history. Now, so those of you who don't know that, there's some. There are a few other things about him which may not be relevant for today's program. For example, some people think that the sale of Ashanti to Anglo Gold actually began or was the highest point of our diverse teacher, essentially moving a lot of companies that we run into foreign hands. Although many people in the international market consider it a success, because for a company that was bought by Lonro for $3 million to be bought or merged with Anglo for $1 billion and to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange, that was really big. So it's a checkered opinion, depending on where you sit. But what is undeniable is that he's a business mogul. He understands business, one of the most respected people in mining. In fact, in the year 2003, the Prince of Wales gave him an honorary knighthood. So actually, the Sir is actually a proper Sir. It's not like Sir. I don't want to mention so others say. So that's Sam Jonah. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to give you quick highlights of what he said. Now, because it's a 30-minute video, I won't play all, but I'm going to just break it into. He did 4 things. First thing he did was talk about the economy, right? And on the economy, he touched on 3 distinct things. He especially talked about the debt situation. There you have it. Our dependence on extractives. Interesting point there that Ghana is Africa's largest producer of gold. We overtook South Africa many years ago. A lot of us didn't know this. Our overdependence on fossil fuels, including oil, the danger of that. He spoke quite strongly about the role of Chinese in destroying our cocoa farms and how they are now going to cocoa farming. And he also spoke about our non-competitiveness in productivity compared with other African countries. Now, here's a quick excerpt of that part of the speech.
Indeed, in his inaugural address in 2016, our president, Nana Akufo-Addo, entreated us to be active participants and not be mere spectators in the affairs of our country. Ladies and gentlemen, I will start off by talking about that which concerns or ought to concern all of us, and that, I must say, which keeps me awake at night. And it is about the state of the economy and its prospects going forward. As an investor, I know what an economy should look like to attract the necessary investment for national development. Available data indicates that for the first quarter of 2020, our GDP grew at a rate of 4.6%. It contracted to 3.2% for the second quarter and minus 1.1% for the third quarter, giving an average outturn of 0.2 for the 3 quarters of the year. COVID, of course, played a large role in it, and one ought to recognize that. For the same period in 2019, the economy grew at a rate of 6%. At the end of the third quarter, the industry sector contracted at minus 3.1, while services grew at 1.9. Only the agriculture sector increased in its growth rate, recording 4.5% at the end of the third quarter as compared to 3.7 for the same period in 2019. This is telling us something, right? Even though government revenue exceeded revised target for the year, expenditure also exceeded the revised target, leading to the end of the year fiscal deficit of 11.7% of GDP. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most alarming aspects of our macroeconomic situation is the debt crisis. At the end of 2020, total public debt reached 291.6 billion Ghana cedis, representing 76.1% of GDP. A nominal increase of about 149.3 billion since January 2017. In 2018, the debt to GDP ratio was 59.1%, increased to 62.4 in 2019, and to 76.1 in 2020. New bonds have since been issued. The domestic debt component is 51.4% of total debt, while external debt is 48.6%. Of course, we all know the effect this has on asset to credit by the private sector for investment. But the bigger question is how all of these debts are going to be paid. This question is important because if you look at our expenditure profile, the top two items are the emolument of government employees and interest payments on existing debt. Thus, we are borrowing to consume and to service existing debts rather than for productive investment. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2020, the emolument of government employees represented 28.3% of total expenditure, while interest payment amounted to 24.6% of total expenditure. Capital expenditure, which we will need to build roads, schools, hospitals, and the rest, was only 12.1% of total expenditure in 2020. And this is not abating soon. In fact, this year, the budget estimates indicate that interest payments would exceed even emolument of government employees to become the number one line item in our expenditure profile. This is why some economists argue that the ratio of debt servicing capacity to debt stock is a better measure of sustainability than debt to GDP ratio. But let me just say this is for another discussion when you invite me back. Ladies and gentlemen, let us look at the key drivers, the main drivers of the economy and their prospects going forward into the future. Let's take mining, for instance. And here, I like to refer to gold mining because it is the most significant mineral in the mining sector. Like all minerals, gold is a depleting asset. It is irreplaceable. Not too long ago, South Africa was by far the biggest producer of gold in the world. Indeed, in 1994, out of a total global production of 81 million ounces, South Africa alone produced more than 20 million ounces, representing 25%. Ghana then did not even register as one of the major producers. In 2020, South Africa's share of global production is only 3%, and it has lost the top spot even in Africa. Ghana now enjoys the enviable position as the biggest producer in Africa. But let's ask the question, 40 years from now, who can say for sure we will still be producing gold here? As for our newly found jewel, oil, as we all know, a lot of countries are talking about green energy and alternatives to fossil fuels due to the phenomenon of climate change. Most countries are making plans to ban or phase out the use of fossil fuels in the near future. So 40 years from now, what will be the demand for oil? That is, if we still have some. Meanwhile, remittances from Ghanaians in the diaspora, which is one of the main sources of foreign exchange for Ghana, is also at risk due to major generational changes. 40 years from now, it is not certain whether the next generation of Ghanaians in the diaspora will feel so attached to families here as to be sending money to take care of them or build houses here. To put it in context, this source represents a significant part of our national income.
Fantastic. So that was Sam Jonah on the economy. He also spoke about governance. So that was the second theme that ran through this. In terms of governance, he basically says that if government is a tripod, the executive has too much power and holds too much sway over the legislature and the judiciary. He essentially said it was an imbalanced relationship. He also spoke about the pervasiveness of corruption in Ghana, and he used the analogy of investors looking at countries like beauty pageant contestants, that there were certain conditions which made it unfavorable for countries to attract good quality investment. And he thought the imbalance, what he calls the executocracy and the pervasiveness of corruption, was damaging to our chances. Here's a quick excerpt of that aspect of the speech.
And since 1992, we have elected governments to steer our affairs. But the very nature of our democratic setup, in my view, is our undoing. The three arms of government are like a tripod. For stability, each leg must have enough strength to stand. In our system, one leg, the executive, has more strength than the other two combined. In fact, the two seem to derive their strength from that of the executive. That's weakening checks and balances. Any party that comes to power has absolute power to do whatever they want. The 1992 Constitution is the basis for the current democratic dispensation. It created a monstrous executive which looms large over the other arms of governance structure. And for 28 years, we have failed to make any meaningful changes to strengthen our democracy. Actually, what we have, if you pardon me to say so, is an executocracy, not democracy. The president is supposed to appoint the majority of his ministers from parliament. So you and I, by definition, that makes parliament a rubber stamp, because no MP in the ruling party will be able to stand up and demand accountability from the executive. They are all scrambling for positions. The judiciary is no different. The president has a determining role in the appointment of all the judges of the Supreme Court, including the Chief Justice. This festers the perception that the situation compromises the impartiality and the independence of the judiciary. Indeed, a large section of the citizenry believe that the judiciary is not impartial, with 85% of Ghanaians in the recent Afrobarometer survey perceiving the judiciary as corrupt and ineffective. My own personal experience with the judiciary is that of frustration, lengthy and costly proceedings. Some lawyers take pride in being masters of legal gymnastics. Every opportunity to delay cases are seized upon. The commercial courts, which were set up to speed up the dispensation of justice, have become a huge disappointment. Disputes involving land overwhelm the courts. Land acquisition is the most important factor, but now I will tell you, in investment decision making. Any prolonged litigation over land frustrates any investor. Indeed, it has been said that the enclave that houses the Lands Commission, Lands Evaluation, and Title Registry, this registry, is arguably the most corrupt enclave in the world. It cannot be good for investment. But Corruption pervades all aspects of our governance structure. A few years ago, a prominent member of parliament said publicly that parliamentarians take bribes to pass bills that favor their sponsors. Ladies and gentlemen, if a fish comes out from water to tell us that crocodile has one eye, who are we to doubt it? Incidentally, the said MP is now the Speaker of Parliament, Honorable Alan Barkley. Our governments, all the governments, we've had pay lip service to anti-corruption, but I'm afraid do very little substantially to cure the canker. Which of the major corruption issues has been conclusively dealt with since the Fourth Republic began? There have been many corruption scandals and none have been conclusively dealt with. I could give you a long list of unresolved corruption cases, but there's no need to bore you with something that we are all familiar with. As a friend of mine would say, the problem with corruption is not the absence of laws, but the certainty of punishment. Sadly, there's rather certainty that corrupt people, especially in high places, will never face punishment. And this has bred impunity in those who rather take it all for themselves through dubious means than serve the common good. We cannot go anywhere if this situation continues. No country can develop without dealing decisively with this canker.
So the final point he sought to make had to do with what he considered socio-economic ills, and this is where a lot of people's oxes were goaded. So, for example, he speaks about why everybody is pretending to be surprised at what happened in Kasua, where 2 teenagers killed a 10-year-old boy. He says that's what the media shows, and this point has been made by several other people. We did an editorial on this. Remember, I was here with Samen Suleiman, and they made the same point. He spoke about the seeming silence of media and the academia and civil society on what he calls both election and non-election related violence. He spoke about that as well. He spoke about the pervasiveness of road accidents. He says our media is too polarized. And then he also says that we have returned to a voluntary culture of silence. A lot of people took issue with this. And in fact, I asked former President Kufuor his views on this particular issue. I'll come to this issue as well. But he spoke strongly about the silence of people when it has to do with key national issues and what he calls a sort of voluntary culture of silence. Here's a quick excerpt of that one as well.
Days ago, we read shocking news of 2 teenagers who were arrested for killing a 10-year-old boy for money rituals. This sparked extensive discussion on mainstream media as well as social media. Many Ghanaians were expectedly shocked that children of this age were so moved by money that they allegedly killed a human being to get it. But ladies and gentlemen, if we were to reflect, we will know that this was merely a symptom of a much more deep-seated problem with the entire Ghanaian society. When our children watch TV, what do they see? Too much religiosity without morality. Pastors displaying uncouth behavior, stepping on pregnant women, slapping congregants, people showing how money can be made without hard work. And when they copy what they see, we appear shocked. Let's stop the pretense. Ladies and gentlemen, what is baffling is that those who used to have voices on these things seem to have lost their voices. People speak on issues based on who is in power. It's our definite silence suggesting that we are no longer concerned about issues that we complained about yesterday. The molestation and, in some cases, assassination of journalists, murder of MPs, corruption, the harassment of agents. We have just finished another election, the 8th in the series since the beginning of our Fourth Republic democratic experiment. As usual, the accolades came from all over the corners of the world, and we took them with pride, as we should. But we failed to tell the world, what we failed to tell the world is that some people lost their lives in the course of the election. Ladies and gentlemen, for me, no election is as important as to warrant the loss of even one life. And the silence over it is numbing, as it gives the impression that it is okay and it is to be expected. No, it is not to be expected. It is not okay. Let me say that one of the saddest moments for me was after the State of the Nation address, when a prominent MP was asked why there had not been serious outpouring of grief about the death of the innocent people in Techiman. His response was that, as far as he was concerned, they were undeserving of any sympathy because he saw them as armed robbers. For me, that was a new low for the country. We also witnessed, arguably, the biggest assault on our democracy since the beginning of the Fourth Republic. When on the eve of the swearing in of the president, at a time when there were no ministers, and crucially, let me repeat, crucially, there was no Minister of Defense, armed soldiers, that is to say, officers from an institution that works by command, invaded our parliament, and up to date, no serious answers have been provided. This could have been grave, this could have had grave consequences for the future of our country. The least of that we deserve is a public inquiry. Have we become so numb to these things? Ladies and gentlemen, the indiscipline on our roads has become a nightmare. Last year, 1,115 people lost their lives or got seriously injured due to road accidents. A 22% increase over 2019 figures, according to the Bureau of Public Safety. For the first 3 months of this year alone, more than 700 people have died from road accidents. By comparison, the COVID-19 has killed 760 people over a 1-year period. This is clearly indiscipline on our roads is far more deadly than the coronavirus. Our media landscape is so polarized and partisan. There is hardly any objectivity because a lot of the media stations are owned by politicians whose interest is in swaying voters one way or the other. Independent media practice seems to have faded, and journalism has become a conveyor belt for political propaganda, insults, and acrimony. What is the status of the role of the media in holding the executive, judiciary, the legislature accountable as the fourth estate of the realm? Is it enough to just report issues? Where are the investigations? Where are the facts? These are the hard questions that the media must ask and reassess its role in shaping our country's future. In the past, when all else had failed, academia was the last vanguard. We all remember the role that the Legon Observer played. Under the hallowed cloak of academic freedom, men and women of conscience could write and speak words that penetrated the halls of power. It appears to me that in recent times, in our fourth Republican dispensation, the courage to stand up for the truth and the determination to uphold the common good seems to be missing. In our dark moments, it is concerning that the voices of the intellectuals are receding into oblivion. Sadly, it is a consequence of deep partisan polarization of our country, said that everything is seen through the lenses of politics. It appears to me that the culture of silence has returned, this time not enforced by legal and military power, but through convenience, parochialism, hypocrisy, and lack of conviction. Where are our Dubois Haynes and PV Hamses, I should ask?
So I hope that's giving you a good flavor of what says Jonah. This is an editorial for you. This editorial is in 3 parts. I've already given you why this is an important editorial, who says Jonah is, and what he said. When we come back, I'm going to talk about some reactions that have come in to the speech. In fact, there were a few newspapers today that reacted to Sir Jonah. It's essentially, some were basically saying he was not speaking the truth on the economy. And then on social media, there have been some attacks on him. And I'm not here to defend or justify. I'm just here to put it in context for you. But I have a very interesting reaction from former President Kufuor on 2 of the key things that Sam Jonah said. Then we'll tell you what we think is the way we should handle the very important issues he raises. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Point of View. Tonight we are editorializing on Sir Sam Jonah's very remarkable speech he delivered at the Accra East Rotary Club, where he spoke about Ghana's future based on his reflections as a senior citizen. It's called Down the Up Escalator. There have been so many reactions. I just want to show you a few more reactions on social media. For example, somebody called Henry Osea Koto says, knowing the kind of vicious vipers they are, they will probably start scheming to destabilize Sam Jonah's businesses and investments. It's something they are known for. We are watching them. He doesn't make a reference to any specific person. There's an interesting tweet here from somebody called Samuel Kensgold. Now, this person was reacting to the fact that while Sam Jonah was trending, something called 46 cities was also trending. And Sam's point is that Sam Jonah diverts free in mind on behalf of our future generations. Future generation too, they discuss 46 cities and dating etiquette. A productive day it has been. So just a quick context. So some gentleman had gone on a date with somebody asking him to pay for his Uber. And a lot of young people were not really interested in Sam Jonah. They were talking about that. And some people thought that wasn't good. That when somebody is discussing your future, you should think about it. Here's another tweet from somebody called Sang. He says, after reading Sam Jonah's speech, I believe it should be printed in the center of all our newspapers. Should be the topic of discussion on all our radio and TV stations, and should be translated in all local languages for everyone to understand. Create spaces to discuss this as well. Okay, so this is what we decided to do. Even though we read a lot of reactions to Sam Jonah, some bordering on personal attacks, some bordering on criticism, which was genuine, we thought we should pick two issues he raised and discuss them with somebody who's run this country. So we've spoken to former President J. Kufuor. We've done that interview today, and we'll be airing it on Wednesday. But I picked the first issue of control of our resources, because in the final bit of Sam Jonah's speech, when he was preferring solutions, he basically said all aspects of our economy are in foreign hands. He says less than 5% of our oil resources are controlled by us. We have 23 banks. He says only 9 of them are majority Ghanaian controlled. He pointed out many sectors that are not in our hands. So I asked former President Kufuor what he made of that, because President Kufuor, don't forget, ran Ghana from 2001 to 2009. Under him, some of that happened. For example, Vodafone, Ghana Telecom shares were sold. Vodafone is a British company. So we wanted President Kufuor's response to the specific issue of control of our economy by foreigners. So I asked him the question earlier. This is the question and this is the answer he gave. Mr. President, there are a few concerns that when you list companies, and in fact, Sam Jonah last week made a comment, gold, mining, foreign companies dominate, oil, they dominate, banking, of the 23, only 9 are local, telcos, even our ports. They feel there's control of a lot of our key assets by foreign interests, which is not good.
Please, unless we look at the situation on basis of facing, P-H-A-S-I-N-G, we may miss the point. The point, like, Sir Jonah was chief executive of Asante Goldfields, became chairman of Anglo Gold Asante. Have you looked at the history of that company?
Yes.
Starting somewhere at the end of the 19th century or so. That time we were in the depth of colonialism, but along the way, that company, which started off Asante, came to Lonro, or some company came in, and then later a Ghanaian company, a Ghanaian government, by virtual decree, said that Ghana would take 54% or so.
Yes.
And it happened. Then along the way, Anglo Gold came in from, so we have Anglo Gold with the state carrying a mandatory interest, carried interest.
Yes.
When it was Asante Goldfields, did we have any share at all in that company? I don't think we had. The company only paid royalties, and I'm sure the royalties were quite meager. What I'm trying to tell you is that because of the phasing, we are moving into times whereby a well-considered legislation, state acts, we may adjust the equity holding so that the local content would increase. But if it's a new company coming in right now, then we should make the laws. Ghana, when I say we, I mean Ghana should make the laws that would ensure that no foreign company comes in to take, say, our gold or our oil or whatever without due partnership of the locals. We have the sovereign authority to do this. But if you're taking us back, that the gold, in those times, before independence, we were subject to that foreign authority, and that was the objection we had to colonialism, because they used us like their assets. We were like chattels to the colonial power. They governed us without accountability. Then into independence, the facing came in, and so bit by bit we came in. Perhaps we've come to the point where we should accelerate the partnership concept so it would be win-win for us and the partner that will come from outside.
I'm sure you're fascinated by the detail in Kufuor's answer, where he made reference to Monroe. And this is an 81-year-old man giving us the history of Ashanti. So he understands the issue. So that's his response. And we think that's the kind of response that is merited. So it must be steeped in history, factual, but also non-attacking, and provide a possibly different perspective. The other question we asked President Kufuor had to do with the return of the so-called culture of silence. Again, and this is not only Sam Jonah who said it, but I framed the question around Sam Jonah. Look, that former president, it said that under this government, people are not talking. People are afraid to talk. And there's a self-imposed culture of silence. This was the question I asked, and this is the answer he gave. There are some in Ghana who say this government is not tolerant. They cite examples of the killing of one of our nurses, investigators. And in fact, somebody said we are in a culture of self-imposed silence. What's your reflection on the way this government has managed media freedom?
Well, this government is my government. And people are alleging that. Are they saying that is the government that killed? Can they prove it? So we have to be careful. If you mean the investigative mechanisms of states are not rising to the occasion, say that. But don't say a government that killed, and killed as a result of intolerance. We have to be careful. But what I think we should urge is that we have been talking of technologies, CCTV cameras and so forth. So we should urge governments to equip society and also the agencies with the technologies, the mechanisms, so that we can bring to book quickly culprits, offending individuals who would want to derail the stability of our communities.
So when they say people are afraid to criticize this government and they are not speaking up, indeed, a few people have said that, even including Sam Jonah, that people are not speaking up to call a spade when the government goes wrong.
They have the experiences. They have the experiences. So I'm in no position to say that what they are saying is unfounded. But for a man like Sam to speak the way you are citing him or quoting him would suggest perhaps he's got some evidence. But at least he's spoken. He's dared to speak. And they say freedom is not handed on a silver platter. Sometimes we fight for it. And this is part of the uses of the media we are talking about. To dare to speak up, to uphold public interest. Public interest being we are independent, sovereign people. So why should anybody try to bottle us up? I hope you get the point I'm making. So you say Sam has said it, and Sam, a very responsible, high member within community, to say that I should not be treated like casually. He must have something he's advocating, and it's not for me to dispute him.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, when you allege, you prove it. You don't put it all on the government as such.
So that's an interesting reaction from former President Kufuor. Essentially, he says, coming from Sam Jonah, he must have a reason for saying this. So we must ask him for some specific details. He says he can't discount the claim that we are in an era of a culture of silence, but we should probe further. This is still the point of view. It's trying to give you highlights of the speech if you haven't seen it, because a lot of people have read but not seen it, and then bring you some reactions. When we come back, I'll give you the final highlight, which is actually his recommendation, and then how we think the discussion should be held. This is still the point of view. Don't go away.
Good Day Energy Drink keeps you going. Available in major supermarkets and shops near you. Excessive drinking can be detrimental to your health. Not recommended for persons under 18 years, lactating mothers, pregnant women, and people sensitive to caffeine. This advert is FDA approved.
You've done the hard work, the analysis, the selection. It's all going according to plan. Until City miss a sitter, and you miss your multi-bet by one. Miss your multi-bet by one, and we will return up to 20 times your stake. We've got your back, even when City don't.
This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the Gaming Commission of Ghana. Bet responsibly, not for persons below 18 years.
Welcome back to The Point of View. So hopefully you are enjoying our show tonight, a special on Up the Down Escalator. This is Sam Jonah's speech he gave. We've told you why it's an important conversation, and of course we've taken you through who he is, and we've given you highlights of the speech in terms of the three main points he makes: the economy, debt situation and other things, governance, the imbalances thereof, and then he also speaks about the socio-economic ills, socio-political ills. We've brought you two reactions from former President J. Kufuor, which interview I end on Wednesday. But the speech was not just problems. He had some solutions, and he grouped the solutions into four. Very interesting. So he essentially says we need to correct our governance imbalances. That's the first point. He says that the triangle has to be equilateral. At this point is a triangle with one skewed side, an isosceles triangle. The longer part is the executive. We should correct that. Then he says we need to reevaluate the structure of our economy. Very important. He says we need to develop our industrial base. And he says 1D, 1F is great, but it's not enough. And then he calls for an overhaul of the educational system, essentially saying we've become producers of graduates who cannot be employed. He makes an interesting point. He thought the conversion of polytechnics to universities was wrong. And this is coming from somebody who trained as a mining engineer before running the largest mining company at the time in the world. He disagreed completely with the conversion of polytechnics into universities, which I thought was very interesting. Strong views on education as well. And don't forget, he's the chancellor of UCC, and he has a house in Adisado College named after his father, which he funded. So he has quite a strong side on education as well. So let's just take highlights of the solutions he proffered in the speech.
Where do we go from here? If you were to listen to the voice of the over the hill, the over 70s, we've seen it all. What will be the advice for the future of this country? Well, this is the advice of the over the hills crowd, who have been of service and are very confident that a word to the wise is enough. First, to have a meaningful democracy, we cannot continue on the path of a tripod with one leg stronger than the other two combined. We must commit to review the experiment with the aim of strengthening accountability and ensuring that democracy delivers real development to the people. Democracy is meaningless unless it is capable of improving the living standards of the people and providing decent living conditions, or at least the very poor in our society.
So, at least now we have a full flavor of the speech. So now let's tell you what we think. First thing is that we think that it's very important as a society to be reflective. And for somebody who has achieved almost everything, to put himself in a very polarized political space in this way, he ought to be commended. Now, I play in a category of statesmen in Ghana who, although have worked for the nation, have not really offered themselves as politicians per se. So, for example, you have Sir Jonah as one. Somebody like Mr. Kwame Pianim is another. So, they've served Ghana in various platforms, but I've never really run for public office. Kwame Pianim's case is a bit different because had it not been for that court case, he may have been the MPP flag bearer for the 96 election, but that's a different issue. Then you have somebody like Tobe Afede as well. Now, because of our very polarized political environment, when people like this speak, you see a lot of people attacking them. Now, we don't think it's very healthy for the country's development. We think that nations like Ghana have to thrive on ideas. And when statesmen and business people or whoever put out points, we have to debate them rigorously. We have to take them on, we have to ask them questions. But that type of debate should not be insulting or filled with rancor. We don't think it's very good. Because what that does is that you keep away all voices. So some of the reaction, which we are not really going to escalate here, is not necessary. There's no point in insulting Sir Jonah, even if you disagree with his business practices, because you can evaluate what a person says based on his own merit, even if you disagree with the person or disagree with his past conduct. So we think that we should take the points he makes on their own. That's very key. So he's speaking about the economy, he's speaking about our debt situation. Now he pointed out facts. Debt to GDP ratio. We are borrowing 30-40 years. Does borrowing for longer tenors necessarily bode well for our future? Now, some of the debt we are incurring now, who is going to pay? Okay, so yes, the bond may be oversubscribed, but doesn't necessarily mean it's good for the future. So I think we should have an economic debate on the debt issue. Again, he quotes people like Confidence on our competitiveness. You may disagree, we can find a way of debating that, but we think that the way of insults and essentially threats and those type of things are not really necessary. That's not the way to go, because it's ideas that develop a nation. That's number one. Number two, we think that for what is achieved, he didn't really have to speak. I mean, some people think, yes, we can even place people like him and the names I mentioned, the category of those who have brought us where we are, because he's been part of the story. Yeah, but he decides to speak, knowing that we're in a very polarized political environment. And we think that's exemplary. And so we think there should be articles written, yes, editorials conducted, contrary views expressed. You can even hold a press conference, interviews done, but it should be based on facts expressed, and of course, if opinion, informed. We think that's very healthy because the country is in a difficult place. We've been independent for 64 years. This is the first time somebody like that is holding a mirror to us and saying, look at yourself. You're 64 years old. Look at your economy. Look at your water bodies. He makes a point about foreigners controlling our economy. That's the truth. We know this. We've said this many times. And it's not just Chinese alone. Now we are saying cocoa. Very soon, EU says they may not even buy a cocoa because of galamsey. Yet we are bringing people in to destroy our forests. These are critical points that have to be made. Polarized politics. People feeling they don't want to speak out. Now, a nation or a life that is not examined is not worth living. So every so often we get a mirror placed in front of us. Now, when a mirror is placed in front of you, you don't shout at the mirror and say, please, I don't like the way my face is shaped. The purpose of a mirror is to help you bring correction. A mirror is not to give you flattery or tell you that I'm good looking. It's like putting a spirit level on a concrete. When the bubble is not in the middle, you don't shout at the spirit level. You're a bad spirit level, no. It's to help you implement change in your life. So when somebody places a mirror in front of you and says, Ghana, you are not as competitive as you think you are. You've been voting since 92, 8 elections. Inequality is increasing. Your economy is not in your hands. Corruption is pervasive. He says the Lands Commission is the most corrupt square mile. Investors won't bring their money. I mean, don't we know this? I think we should look at it and say, so what can we do? Okay, it speaks about some of the issues that happened in the election. The military entering the chamber of parliament when there was no government. That's serious. These are serious points that somebody like him ought to raise. And I think the way we've politicized issues is endangering us. I think one of the big dangers is politicization. Truth must be truth, irrespective of who speaks it. Now, if we hold that mirror, which aspects of what he has said are lies? I think we should ask that question. On the economy, think about it. On governance, now, hasn't CDD and IBEG and TOCO told us about the excessive powers of the executive? That the judiciary and legislature, our parliament is almost like a rubber stamp. Don't we know this? I mean, do you these are, but the articulation and the contextualization is key. Okay, and I think the premise of his speech is very important. The fact that he says, look, if I don't speak, I will regret it. And we actually urge more people like him to come out and be clear on the issues. Okay, if one person speaks and everybody keeps quiet, it's like, oh, he's because they've taken his business, or, you know, we are younger and we have a bigger stake in the future. And a lot of us don't seem to care about the future. A lot of the people in their 70s, I don't think they'll be here in 50 years' time. How many people do you know who are older than 120? But those of us below 50, this is actually, we should be more interested. And I want to urge those on social media not to be facetious and flippant. You have kids. What school are they going to go to? What water will they drink? We did a report on TV on Saturday. Women in Bibiani say they don't have water to drink. They have to buy pure water because somebody wants money and is doing galamsey. And somebody is bringing foreigners to destroy a water body. If somebody says this, I think we should be more serious about our country and look at what areas we have to change. By all means, let's debate it, but the insults are not necessary. And let's not make partisanship the standard for anything. For once, forget about which party you belong to. I know a lot of people say, actually, we are NDC. When he said he's bashing the government, so let's support it. That's not the way to go. It's more about whether what he says is the truth. So for me, I think we should just go into self-reflection, serious, sober reflection on the future of this country for the next 64 years. If we continue going the way we are going, he seems to be saying that you've done 64 years of independence. If we continue on this path, you have an economy, you will be in debt, your country will not be in your hands, you have water to drink, your society will be destroyed, your TV has crazy images, your kids will be destroyed. You're essentially going to go back to the Stone Age. That's what he's telling you. I think we should think deeply about this. Let's pause and think, which is why we dedicated an hour to this. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch on YouTube the aspects of the video we've played. This is time for reflection as a society. We have a lot of challenges. We are not as competitive as we think. Being first, independent, sub-Saharan Africa is great. But that's not going to bring jobs to your people. Having the most eloquent Kwame Nkrumah as your founding father will not make you competitive. Côte d'Ivoire has beat you to cocoa for the past 40 years. So that's the issue. It's not about historical accolades. It's about competing for the future. We're producing hundreds of thousands of young people into our job market. They are not well trained. There are no jobs for them. Everybody wants to enter politics. We need to stop that. This is a serious issue. And this is what he's telling us. Now, don't hide under a political party and insult him or people older than you who are speaking out. Because they will live on the law of averages. They will die before you and I. We are younger. Now, they may be dead and gone, and we will deal with the social ills. Look at what's happening in Kasua. Yesterday, chiefs called the police and said the crime is too much. Many parts of our society, you can't even drive at night. Look at the road accidents. More people were killed on our roads than by COVID. COVID has been with us for a year. In 3 months, we had 771 people die, part of the lawlessness. This is very serious. A society that cannot look at itself and change and always has to make something politics and insult, that society cannot progress. We are supposed to be the bastion of democracy. A democracy also includes a contest of ideas held in a healthy way, not necessarily insulting and also not just flippant social media commentary. So please, let's not make this one of the jokes and let's stop making memes about this. We have to be serious about Ghana. And if you don't understand the issues, you don't have to tweet. It's not by force to say something on social media because everybody is talking. You owe it to yourself to fight for the future of this country. And the best way to do that is to inform yourself, especially as a young people. I'm talking to the young people because a lot of them seem to be disinterested in what's happening in the country. That's not the way to go. Send us a comment, like the video you're seeing, share with your friend. Let's hear from you about Sam Jonah's speech and other speeches that we hope senior statesmen like him, who have decided that they would rather just enjoy their retirement, should come out, speak out, be part of national discourse, because this is where you are from. So we want to urge those other people who have ideas to express but are afraid of the backlash not to be afraid, because we have only one country and this is the only way we can build it. It's a contest of ideas and also contesting those ideas in a positive way. We hope you've learned something. Thank you so much for your time with the point of view. Don't forget the show was brought to you by the First National Bank. How can we help you? My name is Bernard Avile. Tonight has been highlights of Sir Sam Jonah's speech, reactions by some key people, and our own few minutes take on this important speech. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Point of View is sponsored by First National Bank. First National Bank. How can we help you?